Hey everyone, welcome back to Alex Talks. This is Alex, and this is another episode of my raw, unfiltered brain dumps that I'm doing. And in this video, I would like to present a collection of things that I have experimented with and things that actually worked, things that actually yielded positive results and gave me high ROI, and it is what I want to present to you. And this is not some type of snake oil hustle university type of course or anything. I'm not trying to sell you a course. You don't have to do anything. You can skip this video if you want. Whatever. I don't really care. I don't really care. Yeah. So here's my perspective or my opinions on how to actually get ahead in your life, your career. And this will be focused on your career more because I feel like if you're around my age, I think you are trying to get ahead in your career or get started in your career. And I feel like these are the good things that you should have in mind. Whether you actually practice it or not, that's up to you. But these things actually worked for me. And I'm sure that this list will continue to grow as I also, uh, you know, go through my career. But these are just the things that I find really useful to know and to practice. Right. So the first thing that you actually need to do to get ahead is to confront your biases and your assumptions. As human beings, we often operate on biases, whether we know it or not. These are just subconscious things that we do without even giving a second thought, right? So, in order to actually get ahead, you need to overcome these. And basically, whatever physical thing that you're going to do, it comes second. The first thing that you have to overcome is yourself. So, honesty to yourself on whether you know what you claim to know, honesty to yourself on whether you can do what you actually claim to do. If you say that you are an expert, or if you say that you are, really excellent in this sort of field or this stack or this particular technology, confront yourself and actually challenge yourself and ask, do I actually know this? Or do I just claim that I know this based on my limited experience working on this? Having worked on something or having worked with something does not actually mean you actually know it. The level of mastery that you think you have may not actually be what you think it is, if that makes sense. So, trying to get ahead means that you have to be honest with that fact, right? So, another thing is honesty to yourself on what or who you actually are and where you fit in the social or organizational hierarchy, right? Humans are biologically social animals. We operate in herds, and that is why we have these things like companies and teams, right? Because biologically, we are programmed to work better in herds. That's just a fact. So, before you do any work on yourself, know where you stand and then work from there. Know how others perceive you, understand how you present yourself, and work from there, right? So, going back to the prior facts above, if you cannot explain or teach it without a single hiccup, you don't really know what you're trying to say or what you're trying to convey. It's just a fact. And the true danger stems from not being truthful to yourself, right? No knowledge is better than false knowledge. It's a fact. So, like I said, humans operate on biases and assumptions. That's just how nature works. And it is no surprise that AI that is trained on top of the data of humanity also tends to that direction, right? Because it is trying to learn based on all the collection of human data throughout human history. And maybe it figured out that this is what humans do. So it is what it's trying to do. And the reason for all of this is that human brain loves comfort. It does not like to induce thinking because it costs energy. And its primary objective actually is to keep you alive. Energy keeps you alive. So anything that costs energy in its perspective, it does not like to do it at all. Right? That's where the concept of comfort zone stems from. So comfort in thinking means operating mainly on known and the assumptions instead of seeking and continuously reasoning towards new things, new conclusions, because that takes energy. And it is analogous to how it costs tokens these days for AI to think. And it is nature, it is human nature to stick to what you know and you stick to your biases. And it is difficult for one to sort of just challenge yourself to what you know and what you do not know. And it's not your fault here. It's just biology that is hindering your growth. And being aware of it is a step in overcoming this and actually getting ahead. So challenge your assumptions, challenge your biases before you do or pursue anything else. And finally, the growth that you're looking for is actually in the work that you're avoiding. That's part one. Now, the second part. Most software or tech education in general emphasizes on knowledge only approaches, where the education part of it focuses on the knowing only most of the time. Universities or institutions or boot camps or whatever tries to practice practicality, where basically they ask you to do projects, but then that is it. Make a project, do something, build something, and then that's about it. But I feel that one of the things that it is actually missing in terms of software education, for example, is the lack of teaching in terms of how to actually navigate about building. So they would teach you something, teach you the technology or the stack, basically giving you the tools, but then they never actually teach you what to do or how to build with these tools. And basically, only by doing and failing and attempting is where you actually learn and you get better. And you will start to realize that it is not these tools that makes the builder, it is what you do with these tools. So, what could happen for most cases that I've seen it doesn't mean it happens to everyone, is that, people can't grow. It's what they call tutorial hell, where they would look at these tutorials, they would try to pursue these certifications. And this actually points back to my previous part, where they think they know something because they have read about it. They probably can squeeze in these topics in their conversations with their peers. But I don't feel that it is actually true mastery over whatever that you're claiming. You just know it. And knowing is only half the battle. And that brings us to part three. So, I, for one, am pursuing a master's in computer science, but actually, it's not for the reasons that most people may think. I have my personal reasons on why I pursue Master of Computer Science. And it is mainly, if you ask me, gun to my head, what is the reason I went back into academia is not for the knowledge itself, because in this day and age, the knowledge is out there. It's free if you know where to look for. So for me, it's not necessarily the knowledge that I want, and it is not the knowledge that made me return to academia. It is actually because of number one, qualifications. And in order to get ahead in this day and age, you need qualifications, right? Because no matter how much you claim to have experience or whatever, these hiring managers, they don't understand. These people who make the decision on whether to let you in or not do not actually know, or to them, it's hard for them to gauge. So, qualifications are a way for them to at least know that you are relevant. And for me personally, um, the main reason that I pursued the master's degree is just to help me with immigration purposes in the future. So this is just my investment for my future plans, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, but I know that there is an ROI, but it is just waiting, and I just have to get to that point where it, becomes relevant. But I know that it is worth investing now. So back to knowing is half the battle. In your company or in an organization or anything else, execution matters more than anything else. If you're working in a team, right, I'm going to be basing all of this based on my personal experiences as a software engineer. Execution matters. And if you're working in a team, it does not matter how sort of how much you claim that you know something, or how much you boast that you have worked with XYZ, or how much of these abstract, cool, best practice ideas. Initiatives do not actually work. Proposals do not actually work. It's nice to have them, it is good to have them, but at the end of the day, what actually counts and what actually matters to the upper management, the senior management, is execution. You need to show the results of your execution. So, pure ideas are worthless, and ambitious plans and these grand statements on which software engineering practice, which principles to instill, it is just arbitrary, just talk, right? And talk is cheap. Everyone can say anything if they read up on enough stuff. And what actually matters and what actually counts, again, is the execution. And so here's the mindset shifts that you can do, or that I did, where before I just approach things with these things like these prefixes, like I think, I intend to, blah, blah, blah. These don't work. Your leaders, your seniors, your upper management, they don't care about what you think. They don't care about what you intend to. They don't care. But instead, try to shift it a little bit. And now think in terms of this phrase. Let's do, and it will solve because of these indisputable facts, right? You gotta you gotta say that you're gonna do this because you know that it will solve this problem X, Y, and Z because of these facts and because of these like measurables, right? You gotta build something that you know it will solve, and then you gotta have the data or the results to back it up. Measurable, quantifiable data to back it up. Whatever that is up to you. But this sort of mindset shift is what actually got me forward in my career. So instead of just talking about things, build the problems, build the solution, and then propose it. That's what PRs are for. So pull requests are not just for feature, you know, feature delivery or feature shipment. If you have an idea, or if you feel like there is a gap in the implementation, if you feel like the implementation can be better, then don't say anything. Don't just highlight this snippet and go to your senior and be like, oh, I think, or I feel like we should implement this. I feel like we should, I think. No, these don't work. What actually works is that take the initiative to actually go fix it, create a PR, and based on what you have fixed or what you have proposed, show that the benefits are there, show that the results from your fix is measurable. So don't be afraid to go in and get your hands dirty, but have the ownership, have the sense of ownership to back it up, right? You need to have this sense of ownership in your work. And let's move on to the next point. I think we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, part 4. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Most of us, I think, we have probably encountered in team settings or within the organizations where internally, obviously, we know that this person is not even as qualified or as knowledgeable as we are. But somehow, some way, they are ahead of you, right? So the main reason is not because the world is unfair. The world is unfair, yes, that is a fact. We can't deny it. But instead of having this mindset of like, oh, I am actually better than them, in due time, everyone will know. See, if you don't tell, how would they know? So, this lone wolf gunslinger sort of mentality actually does not work. And I was this person who was really strong on this mentality. And until I made the shift mentally, like I was not growing as much as I wanted, and I was wondering why the world is unfair. But then I realized that I need to take this to my advantage. And when I actually became aware that this is what I needed to do, where I need to make sure that my good work is recognized. Now, like I mentioned here, how you do it is up to you. You need to have your expertise or whatever, however you want to do it, but make sure that your good work is recognized. And that means that you need to shift from thinking that, oh, if I am good enough, people will come to me, people will respect me, people will know it. No, if you don't tell, they won't know. That is the truth. So you need to be smart at this, and this is actually how you get ahead. But this does not mean that you must falsify your work, your mediocre work, as good work. You still need to do good work. It's just that if you feel that it is a good piece of work that you did, make sure that it is recognized somehow. And another thing is show within your organization or your team that you are constantly improving yourself or working towards improving yourself. And being transparent in this process is actually not a weakness. It is something that upper management will be aware of, and it is something that they will actually consider when they want to, you know, give you a raise or whatever. And another point is that companies do not care what you know. So if you are approaching your interviews or the hiring pipeline or whatever with this notion of, oh, I know this tech, so therefore am deserving of this job, or I am an expert in this stack, so I deserve this job. No, as software engineers or whatever, your tech stack, your programming skills is just a small part of it. What actually gets these, you know, well-known figures in our industry ahead is not their technical skills. It's beyond that. And it is something that we need to be aware of as early as possible in our career to actually progress. But this does not discount the importance of actually knowing your craft. Being skilled is still important. I'm just here to point out that purely that is not enough. So tech is always evolving, right? So whatever stack that you feel like you are a master at may not be relevant in the future at all. Tech is always evolving. So what needs to remain constant is the builder mentality, where you approach things with the problem solving mindset first, and then the tech follows. So your core problem solving skills and how you approach things, they remain constant, and they should be the driving factor, not the tech. You don't solve a problem with PHP or JavaScript or Golang. You solve a problem differently. And then you use these languages, you use this particular stack or tool to solve that problem. I hope that makes sense. And this actually just restates what I mentioned above with the squeaky wheel thing, where be a loud worker, you know? You do not have to be afraid to advertise your good work, like I said, but you do not boast, or you do not falsify, you do not lie, you do not cheat. But if you are doing good work, it needs to be recognized. And be transparent in your processes. So if you have a team Slack channel, advertise, talk about what you're doing. If you faced any problems, talk to your peers. Make it known that you are doing work and making progress, and be transparent of your blockers as well. If you face the challenge, you do not need to be, so egotistical in the sense that, oh, I have to be the one that fixes this before anyone else, or I must, overcome my own blockers. And getting help is actually not a weakness. So don't be afraid of being transparent with your blockers. Sometimes it's actually not even a blocker itself. You're just not thinking at the problem correctly. So it's just nice to like huddle up with your peers, your colleagues, just talk through the problem. Let them be the rubber ducky. And more often than not, when you talk about the problem to someone else, you actually solve the problem. It happens to me more times than I would like to admit. So just talk to people, talk through your problems, talk through the blockers, and that's how you actually grow. And don't be, afraid, or don't be hesitant on reaching out for help. People are more willing to help you than you think. And always raise concerns. If you have any doubts, or if you have any sort of smell that you detect in the current system, raise it. And if it's not the case, then no harm done. But if it actually was a gap that people were overlooking or dismissing, then brownie points to you. You raised a valid concern. And this is where you actually jump in and basically do this execution matters part, where you identified what is missing, or what the issue is, and be like, hey everyone, I noticed that we have this particular gap in our workflow. I have come up with this PR where it addresses the problem because it was missing this, and now I have added this, and this helps prevent whatever was happening from recurring, or we just patched it up. And here are the unit tests, here are the integration tests to make sure that it is a valid fix, meaning that before this test, or before this fix, if you were to run these tests will fail, and it just surfaces whatever the concern was. And basically, after these tests and after your fix, actually, these tests are going to pass. And this is one of the examples of measurable progress, measurable results. Yeah, so that is what you actually need to know. And that was actually a very valid example. Hope that was useful for you. So don't be afraid to sound stupid. Like I said, people don't care about you as much as you think, right? Most of the time, it's just in your head. And fail safe and fail fast. That means that do not be afraid that you're going to break things. You will break things, but the way that you break things and the way that you recover is what differentiates you from a good engineer and a bad engineer. So it doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want, break production, but it just means that you do not have to be afraid of breaking production if you know that what you're doing is valid, and you take ownership of implementation to delivery to monitoring. So fail safe and fail fast. So invest time and effort into developing safety nets and guardrails so that even if you do fail, you don't fail too badly. For example, if you have this experimental performance improvement that you think is valid, but you know that it might break V1, then ship it as V1.1 or something, and put in a flag, a production level flag or whatever, where you can do A/B testing on certain end users with this performance improvement and certain end users without. And then do the monitoring and develop the measurables to actually see if whatever you have fixed is actually improving the system. And if it does, given enough data points, then you know that it was actually a good improvement. And that should be the final sort of like the version that is served in production. So develop, or there is something that should be, like increment, not incremented, sorry. Um, that is something that should be in production as the source of truth, not just an experimental test. So that's one thing. And another thing, this is more of like a social side of software engineering or working in teams in general, is that people know less than you think, right? Whatever senior or lead engineer that you look up to, I'm not dismissing that they know less. I'm just saying that whatever you think that they probably know less than you think. So dogma is bullshit. So you can't just see a person and be like, oh, this person probably knows everything. And whatever they are saying or they're claiming is true and authoritative. So dogma is bullshit. Never assume authority. And you have to let it earn your respect. Have the self respect to make sure that whoever is talking to you or whoever's guiding you, um, like they need to earn your respect as well. And if you're in a setting that is not conducive of this sort of mindset that I'm proposing here, where you have to listen to this person regardless of whether they are right or wrong, just because they are more senior, you're probably in the wrong setting. And more often than not, there's nothing that you can do, and you just have to deal with it. But it does not mean that you have to be a bad person or you have to turn into a bad engineer because of it. Set yourself up to some standards and live with those standards. And I think for most cases, if you are still valid, if you are still saying and doing good things, then I think that becomes moot. Like whatever sort of authority, this false authority that this person, whoever is trying to assert, it just becomes bullshit. And they need to earn your respect regardless. And if you're in a setting that is, like conducive of this, then congratulations, you're in the right place. It's it's more valuable than you think. So if you shift your perspective, that also means that it is fine that people won't respect you upfront. So you can't just enter a new environment, a new settings, a new team, and expect them to, like respect you upfront. So you still have to earn their respect as well. It works both ways. And that means that you need to earn the seat at the table, and you need to make sure that they respect what you have to say. And that have no sorry that needs to be earned, and the only way that you can earn it, from my experience, is doing good work and showing ownership, and basically doing all these loud workers, letting them know how or what you're working on, showing execution and just making sure that you're doing good work. So the grunt, deep, good work still needs to be done. And that is the way that you actually earn the respect. You can't just flex your seniority. You can't just flex your past experiences and expect people to immediately respect you for just that. It does not work that way. And if you think that way, you probably cannot get as far as you want to. And how to get what you want? Ask. That is a very simple thing that I learned in these past few months, actually. That actually makes sense, right? If you want something, ask for it. And more often than not, you probably would get it, right? There is no harm in asking. And if you do not get it, then now you know that you can't get it. But if you don't ask, you will never know. And you know more than you think you do. I think that is a very important thing. Like, as we progress in our careers or in life in general, we accumulate knowledge, we learn these new things, we encounter new people and we learn things from them. But especially in like a team settings, I am pulling inspiration or analogies from my personal experiences and personal experiences at work. And basically, you know more than you think you do. And if you think you don't, it is just probably because you are not articulating well. So, this is one thing that I discovered, or not discovered, sorry, just learned recently, is where just having the knowledge itself is not sufficient. If you want to grow as an engineer or whatever, you need to be more articulate, as in, you need to have the capability to articulate your thoughts to someone better than you think you can. That means that this articulation skill is something that you need to build. So, for example, say like the example that I gave just now in the situation where you found this code smell or you found this gap, you have a PR to address it, and now you're talking to your senior or whoever's going to do the PR review. Now, at this point, it is critical that you have to be absolutely perfect in articulating what you are trying to propose. You have these ideas, you have implemented them, but if you're not articulating well, you are not, how to call it, you need to give a sense of confidence in yourself. And by articulation, you need to make sure that they are also confident about what you are fixing and what you're proposing here. So, being articulate is an absolutely necessary skill for others to, number one, understand what you're doing, and number two, to actually respect you as a fellow engineer. So you can't just be like, hey, this is valid, you should know about it. No, you need to have the skill to actually present and back up what you're trying to propose and what you're trying to implement. And it is a very important skill that I had just recently become aware of. And I think that if you are aware of this earlier in your career, or before you even start your career, I think it will be absolutely beneficial for you in your growth overall. So invest time and energy in trying to improve your articulation skills. And better articulation at times is actually better than having more knowledge. Being able to articulate things well is better than knowing everything, but then you don't have the capability to present them in a format that is well digested by whoever you are presenting to. And in order to grow, you need to talk to people and seek mentorship. So you have to talk to leadership, be it tech leadership or non tech leadership. And there is this thing I'm going to say up front where even if the person in your team is not a technical expert or not from the technical department, it does not mean that you can talk down to them or you can, like assume that they are less than you. They're probably an expert in whatever that they're doing, just as you are an expert in technical stuff. So that's just one thing that I would take a tangent on. But coming back to this, you need to talk to leadership or seniors or even just like colleagues in your organization, and that's actually how you grow. So it also indicates, as I mentioned previously, that when you talk to these people, when you seek for their advice, it shows that you're actually trying to improve. It shows that you're not a cup that is full, and it shows people that you're willing to learn, willing to accept feedback, and willing to accept criticism, right? Like, if you feel that you are a full canvas, if you feel that, you're a cup that is full, taking the cup analogy again, then there's nothing more to add to you. And you're just what you are now. And if you're, satisfied with that, then that's fine. But that does mean that you are not going to grow as much as you think you are. So have an open mind, talk to people, get some feedback, and try to, accept criticism well. And the thing is actually that if someone's critiquing your work, it's actually a good thing because they want you to improve and they are willing to take time out of their precious life to actually say something that's beneficial to you and is nothing to them at all. So that's actually a good thing if you know how to work it. So, and another thing is like if you can't find any worthy mentor in your organization, you can seek mentorship from online communities that are reputable, that are relevant. And another approach that is good is that, open source communities, right? Contribute to open source projects. And more often than not, in their community guidelines, you need to follow certain instructions or certain rules. But then the way that they communicate back to you in these open source contributions, if you're making a PR to an open source project, is actually quite civilized than you may think. And you will learn quite a bit from just that process of how communication in that sense works. And you may actually learn a few things from this. So if you can't find mentorship within your organization, you can still find it elsewhere. You just need to you just need to know where to look for. So yeah, in terms of like just biological sense, humans learn from one another, and you are the result of all the conversations you had or didn't have with other human beings throughout your life to this point in time. And another point here, what part is this? Like, this is like beyond 10 now. Customers and support staff, or even QA, is actually not your enemy. You can't just have this is the the cognitive bias that I've been talking about, where you can just be like, oh, I know more than customers. These customers, they don't understand. They don't understand the sophistication of our system, the sophistication of our work. They're just being ungrateful. No, they are not your enemy. You can't just think that way. So you need to talk to them, actually, as much as you can. Get close to the customers or your clients or the support ground team, the support staff who may be talking to the direct customer, is actually more beneficial than you think, right? So the only observables of your delivered work is these APM platforms or observability tooling that you use as engineers. But these data points can only get you so far, right? A combination of these data points and talking to these customers helps you paint a bigger picture of what your software product is doing, what your feature is doing, how it is impacting people, and how it is sort of addressing their pain points in whatever workflow or whatever part of their operation that they're trying to, accomplish. So you need to understand, as engineers now, especially in this day and age, you are not just coders anymore. You're not just writing code for the sake of writing code. You have to transition to become a product facing engineer. And coding is just a very small skill in your arsenal. And you now need to understand how the product is being experienced. And that is how you actually get better at building the product as well. So, as much as you can narrow the gap between you and the end user, the better. And you will gain a lot from this. So, talk to your customers, talk to your clients, talk to the support staff. However, communication channels, whatever that you can use them. And as software engineers in general, we need to develop quicker feedback loops. Software engineering is a team effort, and therefore, it is not just one person's decision for go no go situations. So, you need to make more frequent and smaller PR cycles, smaller PR feedback cycles where you would create a PR, someone would review it, you would fix it, course correction, ship the PR, or dismiss the PR entirely because it was irrelevant, and try again or proceed to the next one. So the more frequent and the smaller PRs that you have is actually going to be super beneficial for you in terms of just shipping, delivery, and overall growth as an engineer. So small changes are easier to work on and easier to ship. Small changes are easier to monitor, right, once they're shipped. And it allows you to ship more frequently and more incrementally. So this is a concept called vertical slices that I will link later in the video. And it comes from this Shape Up manifesto or something from Basecamp. And it is something that my team has been implementing and integrating into our engineering processes. So basically, the abstract or rough idea is that you want to narrow the round trip time from stability, as in like the stable state, to dealing with an incoming signal, whether it be positive or negative, and follow it up by doing an appropriate course correction so that you return to the stable state. So, as much as you can reduce or minimize this round trip time between stability, signal, and course correction, the faster that you can improve as a person in general, even. So, as an engineer now, if you think that your PR is already small enough, think again, it can always be smaller. If you think that 10 file changes is already small, maybe change your mind or think in alternative perspectives, and maybe it can even be two PRs, two smaller PRs with five file changes. It's up to you. So another good thing about small changes is that small change means that people or whoever's reviewing your work can give you feedback faster, right? If they need to look at this huge PR with 100 file changes, they're probably going to dismiss minor details, and you probably are not going to get feedback on like minute details. But if you ship smaller PRs, there's lesser thing that they need to be aware of, and therefore they can actually focus on the microscopic details and give you feedback on even the smallest things like variable naming and everything else. And that actually adds up as time goes on. So smaller change also means that if anything, like messes up when you ship it, you can correct it faster. And you can correct it easier as well because the blast radius is much smaller. And here's the thing, this is quite important. Management does not care about your big ideas or what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you have in your head. They don't care about what you have in your head. They care about how you can solve the problem. And they are absolutely 100% aware of who can solve their problems well. So they reward people who solves their problems. They don't reward people who just claim to know things. This just point back to all the previous tracks that I've been talking about. So you need to be loud, you need to be, you need to be solving problems, and that's how you actually get the recognition and respect of like senior management. So like I mentioned just now, where technically complex solutions or like very sophisticated solutions, they don't care about your tech stack in general. So technically complex solutions do not always mean that management is going to appreciate or have the knowledge to even appreciate or know that it is something that's worth appreciation, right? So sometimes like things like small visual UI UX change is more impactful in their perspective than this, like whatever tech stack or whatever parallelism that you have implemented does. So ego does not belong in this domain at all. So whatever sort of like impactful change that you can make in their perspective is how you actually grow and how you actually get ahead. It is not how sophisticated you are. There is this ego problem that you have to overcome. And a very simple thing, you need to read and you need to write. So in terms of reading, what I mean is that you do not know what you do not know. So reading gives you a chance to know what you do not know. And by reading, it helps you make better judgments when you're facing unknown problems because you can look back and refer back to similar cases, similar case studies, for example, and then you can work from there. So it's nice to be knowledgeable, but that's not the only factor. And like I mentioned, it is always nice to have food for thought, right? If you don't read, you don't have food, and thinking requires energy, food, if you get what I mean. So another thing is write, right? The reason that humanity excelled and moved forward is because we learned to put our thoughts on paper and followed by like the printing press and whatever. And that is the main reason that humanity excelled, because whatever that's in your head is just in your head. Until you write it down, it is not concrete. So you write things down to make whatever you're thinking of clearer, and you write things down to see if whatever reasoning chain that you think you have in your head, you write it down to actually verify that that logic, that sequence of logic actually flows. And you don't write just to state things. Sometimes you need to, but you should write to think, right? That's what the previous point means, where when you're writing things down, you actually, you know, visually start to verify that your reasoning chain is actually logically sound. And personal preference, pen and paper is always better than typing things down, and I won't let anyone tell me otherwise. So, just a few more points, and I will conclude with this. So, you need to learn to solve problems. And the way that you learn to actually solve problems is not by learning more tech, or another certification will not help you. So, as I mentioned above, hiring managers do not really care about the tech that you know. They don't care. They care, or they need problem solvers that are worth investing their money in, right? When they're hiring you, or when they're making the decision to hire you, they are actually thinking in terms of, oh, if I invest this amount, which equates to your compensation package, is it worth investing this amount of money in person A versus person B? Because we feel that person A might solve our problems better than person B. That is the decision that they're making. And how this person A or B fits into our engineering culture, that comes later. But the main problem that they are trying to solve is how you are going to solve their problems, given the money that they invest in you. So, for example, if you're in an interview, don't just talk about how you have worked with, stack XYZ. Like, I've used MERN stack, I've used LAMP stack, whatever stack that's in trend these days. That's a weak signal to managers, in my opinion. You should talk about how you solve a valid user pain point, like how you solved a problem that the team was not even aware existed. So how you solve a user pain point is like a valid thing to talk about. I think if you have worked in uni projects, even, like, you can always pull experience from there. And how you identified it and how you solved it is what you should be focused on talking about. And then follow it by the particular tech that was fit to solve this problem. But like with these interview processes, usually in the screening test, they don't really care about what stack, because the person who is screening you is probably not a tech person. So the fact is that problems are everywhere, but good solutions are rare. So these people, or managers, or whoever, they care about how good your solutions are, because problems are everywhere, but that does not mean that every solution is a valid solution as well. So you need to come up with good solutions first, and then follow it up with the tech that supports this good solution. And it's just an example of what I've mentioned prior, where in uni, if you're still in uni, you should talk to people, find out problems that they're facing, and then you should start to build these like internal toolings or solutions or platforms to help aid, or just reduce the pain of the problem that they're facing. And you should, like, if you're in uni, there are probably active projects, research projects or whatever, that are ongoing. Try to participate in them, talk to whoever's working in there, and try to see if you can improve their operation, like the operational costs that you can reduce for them to get their work done in their project. Like, if you can reduce that, then that is like super, super brownie points for you. And you could actually, and that's the thing, where like you can take that experience and then, like, articulate it better, like I said, and then talk about it when you're in the interview. And if you're in your current job, how you can improve within the organization or within a team is that firstly, you should just zoom out from your current job scope from time to time. Right? You can't just be zooming out all the time. That's not how it works. But you should talk to other engineers from other teams. You should talk to support staff, like I mentioned, talk to QAs, and identify the pain points that they have. Sometimes it's just like human pain point, but sometimes it's like valid operational pain points can that that are things that you can fix or help improve, right? So identify them, and then like propose and develop proof of concept or prototypes of how whatever that you are building fixes their problems. And basically that is actually how you gain respect and recognition of not just your immediate team but just across the organization. And an example of that could be like better internal tooling for support staff, like allowing the support to have better access to the data or whatever artifacts that they're trying to help support, or better automated QA workflows. You could collaborate with QA engineers and come up with like better QA workflows to help them reduce the pain of QAing your work. And also finally, like the best way that you can gain respect as an engineer is to develop internal tooling for other engineers, so not just users. um, and you can get as creative as you want with that. And these are just personal sort of like recommendations, and things that I have actually built upon based on my own experiences after closing in on 6 years now as a software engineer, where I want to talk about sleep and problem solving techniques. So, one thing that I got wrong earlier in my career is thinking that hacking away at a problem endlessly without sleep, anything, is actually not the right solution at all. I fall back into this bad habit at times, but I'm trying to get better at not doing that. So it is actually not the right solution at all, despite how productive it may seem, right? Because you naively would think that if you're working on something continuously, eventually you will make a breakthrough. But it does not work that way at all. So there is this sort of like a mantra or this thing that I try to follow, in fact, is that if you can't figure out a problem, seek knowledge. And if the knowledge proves useless, sleep. That's it. Sleep or getting enough sleep actually is a valid problem solving technique, believe it or not. So, another thing that you need to keep in mind as an engineer is that 90% of problems you would encounter in your day to day job are actually solved problems. There is always probably already a solution to whatever that you are trying to work on. There is probably a well tested, well implemented design for whatever that you are trying to implement for your particular project or for your company. So the the problems that you encounter as a software engineer most of the time are solved problems. And if you if you feel like there is no solution, and if you feel like you are the person to invent the wheel, you are probably reinventing the wheel. And the main issue here is that you are just framing the question wrong, or you are just formulating the problem wrong. So the most important thing that you have to do when you're trying to build something or when you're trying to fix something is make sure that you are formulating the problem correctly. right? The majority of the problem solving techniques that you will find, especially if you're learning about data structures and algorithms, is that before you actually even implement or design the algorithm, you need to formulate the problem or the class of problem that you are solving, and identifying it correctly is actually going to reduce the amount of headache and the amount of work that you actually need to do later on. So, making sure that you are addressing the correct problem is more important than coming up with the correct solution, if that makes sense. So, you need to frame your questions or formulate your problem very precisely and very effectively. So solve your problems from not just a technical perspective. You should talk to product to get a fresh or alternate perspective on the issue. And you should always sleep to clear up the stress buildup that's happening in your brain, right? Your brain is a biological organ. And just like how you become, like dirty or something after a day of work, your brain also accumulates these stress byproducts after a day of work. And the only way that you can get rid of them or flush it out of the system is to sleep. That process of clearing up only happens when you're sleeping. There's no substitute for it. None. So you should think of ways to prevent the problem by designing alternative workflows in the system so that the end user does not arrive at the faulty state or the problematic state in the first place. So this is what I meant by formulating the question, not wrong actually, like formulating the questions correctly in the first place, right? So like if you are given this legacy system that is buggy and people are constantly dealing with this bug, it probably can mean that the original implementation is faulty or became irrelevant for the latest current use case of the system, because like these systems are always evolving in terms of user requirements. So sometimes if you are if you're noticing that end users are constantly facing this bug or this error is constantly being raised system wide, that is probably a good signal that the implementation is faulty. And rather than fixing the symptoms, you should actually take a step back and zoom out and think of how you can actually improve or how you can build or rebuild such that the users do not arrive at this problematic state in the first place. Um, so you have to question yourself if you are solving the symptoms or the root cause, right? And if you are just solving symptoms, that is tech debt. And good engineers, they fix the root cause. Poor engineers, they only fix the symptoms. So if you want to be a good engineer, if you want to take the initiative and show ownership, and if you find a buggy part of the system where users are experiencing delays or a bad experience in general, look at the implementation. Think if an alternative design can prevent this entire chain of problems or bugs in the first place. And then, follow the suggestion that I mentioned just now, where You propose it, do like A/B testing, articulate your solution well, and if that gets implemented, brownie points to you. You will gain the organizational clout, if you will, using Gen Z terms. And finally, you just need better processes, right? If you're solving a massive production bug in a rush timeline, or if you're suddenly needing to deliver a feature in such a time crunch, the issue is not you or your competency in general. And if your manager or whoever claims that it is, then they are probably poor managers. It just means that if you're facing these problems constantly, you probably had underestimated or underworked the pre planning and the system design phases, as well as the requirement analysis phases of your software development lifecycle. So it is not the lack of technical skill, as I mentioned, as an engineer. It is just poor project management and poor work estimation. So, but there's no sort of easy rule of like thumb um where like I give this solution or give this like suggestion and then like these problems are eliminated. You have to go through these shitty moments just to gain the experience of getting better at estimating work and estimating the requirements, not sorry, estimating the work needed to fulfill the requirements that are expected of the end user or your upper management. And if you're constantly facing this problem, like I say, you just need to improve upon your work estimation process and your project management style as a team in general. I have faced countless, um, like such problems, as I mentioned, and it usually points back to me not estimating or not planning the work better before I start the work. So this process, like this phase that's earlier in the software delivery process where you are planning and where you are shaping things, is very important. It's vital to your success as a team and as an engineer. So you can solve this by generally trying to improve upon the engineering culture that you have in your team, or just improve your workflow or your processes as an individual. So I will remind again that this is not a competency issue as an engineer, it is just a process issue. So if you improve upon your workflow, generally the amount that, or sorry, the rate of your productivity, the effectiveness of your delivered work will improve. It's not a competency issue, it's just a process issue. And you don't need to get that confused. So, this has been a very long brain dump of how to actually get ahead from the perspective of a software engineer, but I hope that some of the points that I have mentioned actually applies not just for software engineering, but applies to your life in general or to other professions in general. And I feel like the specific examples that I gave were just software engineering focused, but I think you can pull these examples for whatever reasons that you may need or find relevant. Thank you if you have been watching up to this point. It has been a very long video, a very long conversation, but appreciate it if you listened up to this point, and I will see you in the next video.